Whether you like the royals or not, there is no denying the impact they've had on the world. With Queen Elizabeth dying last year, a lot of things are gonna change. Hello everyone and welcome back. I'm your host Emily, and today we're going to count down our list of the top 10 dark secrets Queen Elizabeth II left behind. Number 10. She married her third cousin. Yes, you heard that right. The Queen and Prince Philip were third cousins. They have the same great-great-grandparents, Queen Victoria and Prince Albert, who were first cousins themselves. Queen Victoria had 9 kids, 4 sons and 5 daughters. Her oldest son Edward took to the throne in 1901 after her death. 9 years later, his younger brother George became king in 1910, and that's Elizabeth's grandfather. His son George VI became king in 1936 and reigned for 16 years until 1952. His daughter, Elizabeth II, then became queen. For centuries, members of Europe's royal families often married their close relatives. The practice stretched across countries, including France, but it led to problems. Offspring born to mothers and fathers who share common ancestry are more vulnerable to birth defects and harmful DNA mutations. Number 9. A gambling queen. Yes, the queen gambled. Everyone knows she loved her horses. Her Majesty began riding horses at 3 years old, when she was then Princess Elizabeth II, and continued to do so in the last year of her life, even against initial instructions from her health advisors. While it's difficult to know how many horses she had throughout her lifetime, before her death the Queen owned more than 100 horses. Since 1988, the Queen entered 3,441 races and won 566 of them in the UK. She made quite a bit of money over the years on her prized animals, reining in about £8.7 million in prize cash, aka around $10.6 million in USD. According to the Racing Post, she had her best year in 2021, winning 36 races, which put her in the top 20 race horse owners. But her most notable accomplishment was in 2013, when her horse Estimate won the Gold Cup, making her the first reigning monarch to win the title in the horse racing events over 2-century history, the Mirror reported. Number 8. She didn't have a license. Royal protocol, even for a queen, means that chauffeurs were in order for official events, but outside of that, she never turned down an opportunity to get in the driver's seat. Unlike her royal contemporaries, you can find more photos of the Queen peering over a steering wheel rather than sitting in the back. As the story goes, the Queen caught the need for speed while getting her hands dirty as a driver and mechanic for the Women's Auxiliary Tutorial Service during World War II, and her passion for the road never went away. In 1998, she famously took King Abdullah of Saudi Arabia, traditionally a place that doesn't allow women to drive, for a spin around her Balmoral estate in Scotland. The king was reportedly concerned that she was going too fast, and I feel like that's a valid point to make because the Queen did not have a driver's license. She had never taken a driver's test and her cars had no license plates, but the Queen always loved to get behind the wheel. She didn't have a license for one simple reason: she didn't need one. All licenses are issued in her name in the United Kingdom, and the Sunday Times reported in 2019 that Her Majesty was reluctant to give up driving on public roads, but did so at the request of her security team. Now, as a 96-year-old, that sounds reasonable since more 96-year-olds have gotten their license taken away at that point. Number 7. She worked as a mechanic during World War II. King George VI did not want his daughter to enlist, but the princess lobbied her father to allow her to serve her country, and he eventually relented. At age 19, Princess Elizabeth joined the Women's Auxiliary Territorial Service in 1945, making her the only female member of the royal family to have entered the military. She toiled as a mechanic and truck driver during the war, and this was a pioneering move. Not only was she the first member of her family to ever serve in the military, but the sight of a woman taking apart engines and changing tires signaled a sea of change in social and gender roles that would continue throughout the future queen's timeline. Thanks to the skill she learned, she's been known to tinker with the Range Rovers at Balmoral on occasion when there's trouble under the hood, and this helped fuel her love of cars and driving. Number 6. The devastating revelation about King George VI. Queen Elizabeth never expected to take the throne at such a young age. When she was born, she was third in line to the throne, and in fact she she was completely oblivious to the state of her father's health. Unfortunately, nearly everyone on Earth found out about his death well before she did, which is just sad. King George VI died sometime in his sleep on February 5th, 1952. However, Queen Elizabeth and her husband, Prince Philip, had embarked on a royal tour at the behest of her father and were in the remote Treetops Hotel in Kenya's Aberdare National Park when the news broke. According to Time, she breakfasted on bacon and eggs and tossed bananas to the baboons below. It wasn't until early afternoon that a reporter from a local newspaper called and told Philip that King George had died. Number 5. When she met Prince Philip. So yes, the Queen and Philip were third cousins, but she first met her husband when she was 8 years old and he was 13 in 1934. They crossed paths at the wedding of Princess Marina of Greece and Denmark to Prince George, Duke of Kent in 1934, and then again in 1939 when she was 13 and he was 18 at Dartmouth Naval College. Elizabeth would later say that this is when she fell in love with Philip, and the pair began exchanging letters regularly. She reportedly never had eyes for anyone else from that moment on. Now, this age gap isn't too weird, it's only 5 years, but when they met and how Philip knew her when she was so young just makes me uncomfortable. But young Elizabeth was utterly enchanted with her husband from the very first time they met. Philip reportedly asked King George VI for Elizabeth's hand in marriage in the summer of 1946. The couple delayed making their announcement public until after the princess turned 21 years old. They got married in 1947 and stayed married for 74 years until Prince Philip passed away in 2021. Number 4. She was cheap and didn't spend time with Charles. Though her 3 children, Princess Anne, Prince Edward, and Prince Andrew, have all spoken warmly about her mother and how much she cared for them as children, King Charles III has another story. The eldest of 4, the king said in his 1994 biography by Jonathan Dimbley that it was inevitably the nursery staff who taught him to play, witnessed his first steps, and punished and rewarded him. Though Queen Elizabeth was worth millions of dollars and was said to be very fair with her staff, she still had a bit of a cheap streak. In fact, it's the chefs in the royal household that felt the brunt of her frugality. Radar Online reports that the Queen refused to allocate any money towards kitchen supplies. It was so bad that the cooks were forced to use pots and pans from the 1800s that still had Queen Victoria's stamp on them. The Queen's frugality often meant that she and her staff were living in darkness. A former royal aide told Radar Online sometimes she goes from room to room turning off the lights. Often huge palaces only have one light on, and for the chandeliers in the palace you never see any of them lit up except for special occasions. Number 3. Her relationship with Prince Philip. When Queen Elizabeth was officially crowned in 1953, the Duke did not receive a title change. In fact, he did not become a prince until 1957, but at the Queen's coronation he dedicated himself to her. According to the BBC, he said, "I, Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, do become your liege man of life and limb, of earthly worship, and faithful in truth I will bear unto you, to live and die against all manners of folks, so help me God." Years following his wife's coronation were not easy for Philip, who grew up at a time when men had the final say. Apparently, he felt emasculated and restless. Now, the sophomore season of Netflix's The Crown depicts the tension in the royal marriage. The prince was given a new title by his wife in 1957 in hopes that it would ease the mounting tension in their marriage, but it has been rumored over the years that Prince Philip hasn't exactly been faithful to the Queen. There have been many whispers about Philip's various relationships with other women. There was a report in the Baltimore Sun that stated the prince was romantically involved with an unnamed woman whom he met on a regular basis in the West End apartment of a society photographer. Now, there's never been any evidence of his infidelity, but even the Crown nods towards it. Number 2. Weighing her guests. Christmas time is full of traditions, and yes, even the royals have some weird traditions. Spencer, the new movie inspired by Princess Diana, opens with a scene of her being weighed by the royal family at Christmas. Viewers were shocked by this and thought it was something that was made up, but no, it is a very real thing. On the surface, this might seem like an invasive or even rude gesture, but it's actually a tradition that dates back to the early 1900s, and the intent is to ensure that everyone is having a good time and that guests have been well fed. Royal expert Ingrid Seward told Grazia in 2018 that the practice dates back to the early 1900s when King Edward VII would have the guests weigh themselves before and after visits. Guests who ate enough and enjoyed themselves were expected to gain about 3 pounds. The palace has never publicly commented on this tradition, and with the Queen's passing earlier this year, I wonder if King Charles will continue this tradition. And coming in at number 1, secret codes. Now, even the Queen gets tired of social outings, so she had secret codes to let people know that she's done with the conversation and wants to leave. Ian Scott Hunter, who worked as Her Majesty's footman for 8 years, revealed a secret code the Queen used to make her staff aware that for her, an event or engagement was coming to an end. Ian said the late monarch used her makeup as a means of communicating with her ladies in waiting. He explained, "I believe there's an etiquette that ladies do not make their faces up in public, but when she had a bag over the side and she would take her lipstick out and put it on with no mirror or anything, that was a signal to the ladies that she was ready to leave. Once the Queen's staff saw her lipstick, they knew a swift exit would follow." Royal commentator Kristen Menzer also shared that the Queen would swap her handbag from arm to arm to politely convey that she wanted to end a conversation. Speaking on Newsweek's The Royal Report podcast, Kristen said, "Supposedly if she's standing around at an event and mingling with people and talking, and she switches her handbag from one arm to the other, she's telling her staff she'd like someone to interrupt and end the conversation." A similar technique was practiced when she'd want to leave a banquet or a formal dinner. Historian Hugo Vickers told people that the Queen would place her bag on the floor if she wanted to go home, but before that it would be on the table, acting as a 5-minute warning. But it wasn't only her bag that she used to enact her escapes, but also her wedding ring. According to sources, the Queen would also make the more dramatic gesture of spinning her ring when she wanted to leave. Now, this is actually genius, and I applaud her for it. Well, that's all for our list of the top 10 dark secrets Queen Elizabeth II left behind. Do you guys like the royals? What's your opinion on them? Comment down below and make sure to like and subscribe while you're down there. I'm your host Emily, and I'll see you next time. Peace.